Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jenny. I'm from JennyCarddesigns. Thanks so much for joining me today. My YouTube channel contains content that is intended to share paper crafting tutorials and inspiration with all of you. I hope that you enjoy. In today's video, I've got another fun project for you, showing you how to create a large style envelope out of 12 by 12 paper. Now, in a previous video, I had shared this large top folding envelope that measures 5 3/4 by 9 inches. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create a similar style envelope that opens and closes a different way, and also that can really help you use up some of those 12 by 12 pattern papers that you really don't know what to do with, that have most of their designs around the outside edge of the page. And I think you know what I'm talking about. There are lots of those sort of patterns that for card makers or paper crafts and things, it's hard to use these large 12 by 12 papers. So let's jump into today's video and we'll take a peek at how we create this larger style envelope. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've picked out a pattern as we discussed with the design basically on the outside of the paper or around the outside edge. I'm going to pop this into my scoreboard, and on the left hand side, this part of the page is going to be the closing flap of my envelope. So just be mindful of that when you're considering the orientation of your page. So the first score that we're going to do is at 2.5 inches. And then the second score will be at 8 1/4 inches. And then I'm going to rotate my cardstock one turn to the right so that the top part of my envelope flap is at the top of my scoreboard. And then I'm going to score at 1.5 inches and 10.5 inches. Okay, so that's going to be it for the scoreboard. And now we're going to make some cuts into this paper to create our envelope. I'm going to grab a pen just to sort of outline so that you can see what we're doing. And I'm going to mark off the areas where we're going to cut away. So each of the 4 corners we're going to cut away, but I'm going to add a little bit of an angle cut on the inside flap, and then I'll just draw an X on the parts where we're going to cut away. So I'm just trying to give you a clear visual of what parts that we're going to cut away and what the envelope should look like when we're done. Okay, so I'm just marking these off, and now we'll go ahead and I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow along the score mark or my pen mark here up to where the score marks intersect. And then I'm going to angle my scissors and make a little angle cut there and cut that piece away. And then I'll do the same thing for the top part of this envelope. We'll do that to both sides, cutting away both sides on the left and the right, top and bottom on the paper. And then you should have something that looks like this. Next up, we're going to crease all of the folds. I'm just going to fold along those score marks and use my bone folder to burnish the creases so we get good sharp creases. And this is where you can make sure to train your paper as well. If the score marks are off just a little bit, you can just help it by guiding it and training the paper where you want it to go. Okay, so this is what the envelope looks like so far. If there's any excess hanging over the side because we didn't cut it straight, we can just trim that off. Okay, and now you'll notice you have a large flap and a small flap. The larger flap is where we're going to add adhesive to close up the envelope and seal it shut. And then this envelope is pretty much done. All we need to do is add some double-sided adhesive to the flap when we're ready to send this envelope. And a large 8.5 by 5.5 inch card fits snugly into this envelope. So if you wanted to step this up just a little bit, you can add an envelope liner. And I'm just measuring here to see how big of a piece of paper I need for an envelope liner. I'm going to go back to that paper pad and pull out something that I think coordinates with this envelope nicely. A little bit of contrast, but nothing too striking, just a little subtle envelope liner. I'm going to need a piece of paper that measures just a little less than 9, so about 1/8 of an inch, less than 9 inches by 5.5 inches. This will give me a nice look on the inside of my envelope and make that a stark white paper a little bit more prettier. I should also mention that you could get 2 envelope liners out of 1 sheet of 12 by 12 cardstock with a little scrap left over. So I'm just going to slip this into my envelope, making sure that it fits, and I'll apply a little bit of adhesive only to the top part of this envelope liner. I only like to add adhesive to that one portion of the envelope liner because this way it allows the envelope to open and close freely without any bulk or stress. I'm going to add 1 strip of adhesive, close the envelope on top of it, and then I'm going to pull in my scoreboard, and I'm just going to help reinforce the score mark because this paper doesn't have any score marks yet. I'm just going to flip over my envelope and just run over that score line there to get through to the other side so I can see where I need to score here. I'll flip it over and score again. This is just going to really help my paper to fold without cracking, and we get 0 stress on that envelope, and it'll open and close beautifully. And then our card will fit inside like a dream. So you have another alternative to a large style envelope, and we use up some of those pattern papers that you have no idea what to do with. Now I know you all are excited to see what I do with these extra large cards, so stick around to the end of this video and I will make a card project for you. But I have one little tidbit to share with you, sort of like a revision to the envelope that I had made the other day for the top folding envelope. Now we're just going to run through this very quickly, starting with the measurements. We're going to pop this piece of 12 by 12 paper into a scoreboard and score at 3 inches and then 8 3/4 inches. Rotate 1 turn to the right and score at 1 inch and then at 10 inches. Okay, next up we're going to make some cuts. Now this is where it's different. We only want to cut away the bottom 2 pieces with a little bit of an angle cut. We're just going to follow at a little bit of an angle along that score mark to the intersection and cut those 2 bottom pieces away. And then for the top, we're going to come in at an angle just a little bit, and then we're going to cut across the score line just until we hit that intersection. So we're basically only cutting a little sliver away from this piece of paper. Okay, let me show you what I mean. I've come in at an angle below the score line to the intersection, and then I'm going to come back in and cut along the score line to the intersection, cutting out just a sliver of a piece of cardstock. Okay, so it almost looks like the letter T by the time we're done. I'm going to do this to both sides, coming in under the score mark and angling my scissors towards that cross section, and then coming back and cutting right along the score mark to the cross section, cutting away just a little sliver. So at this point in time, we have a little letter T on the top. That makes sense? So what we're going to do is fold these pieces in. So I like to take the right piece, fold it in first, and then take the left piece and fold it over top. I'm going to crease my folds and I'll apply some adhesive there. So basically what we're doing is, instead of coming back in and adding an envelope liner or gluing scraps to cover this white piece of paper, we're going to use the paper to our advantage. Then we have less waste, we use up as much of that paper as we can, and our envelope looks so completely finished. Okay, so I'm just applying adhesive. I will close that little flap and seal my envelope shut. And then I'll go ahead and I'll start creasing the folds for the rest of this envelope. As I mentioned, I'm taking the right side and folding it under, and then the left side I'm folding over top. So creasing all those folds, I'm going to apply some adhesive to the little flap on the right side. So when I fold the left side over top, it will lay over top of that exposed adhesive. Okay, so I'm folding in the right flap and the left flap over top. And then I'll apply adhesive to the bottom part of this envelope. And then we have a nice, clean, cohesive look. If you'll notice, that pattern sort of runs across the envelope right into that closing flap. Turned out really nice. So I'm going to grab a corner chomper and just make those edges a little bit more decorative. And then that's it. So we literally only wasted the tiniest little scrap piece of paper from this piece of cardstock, and the rest of it turned into this beautiful, gorgeous envelope. I hope that you've enjoyed that little revision. I know I was super excited to see that I could make that all match together nicely and not have to add extra cardstock or any extra steps. It was kind of cool. Okay, so here are both of the envelopes that we made here today. Both of these envelopes will fit a card that measures 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches. Now let's get into making a gigantic card to put in these envelopes. So you asked for it, and boy, did I deliver. I'm in love with the finished result of this card. So I had gotten many requests after uploading that large envelope. Subscribers wanted to see what I would come up with and create for a large card such as this. I think some people are intimidated by it, and I don't think there's a need to be intimidated. I think there's just room for more decoration and more embellishment. So I'm going to dig through my supplies and pull out a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not sticking to any one type of brand or product. I'm just using whatever I've got, whatever I think is going to look pretty on this card. So to begin, I had originally chosen a ivory color card base, and I felt like where I was headed with this design, it wasn't going to work. So I decided to switch it out for a piece of gray cardstock that I have in my stash. And this gray cardstock is not the heaviest cardstock. I think it's about 80 pounds. For a big card like this, I would prefer to use, a heavier 120 pound card base. But it is what it is, and I'm working with this one. So I'm going to pull out some dies. I have some Gina Designs Master Layouts. I think this is Master Layouts 2, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Gina Designs has a whole bunch of master layout die sets, and what's great about these is that they're not all the same size. So you get a variety of different styles and shapes and things in each one of the master layouts. So it's a fun collection to build on. I'll link those in the description down below. I have really enjoyed collecting them, and I find these are my most used dies ever. I use them for almost every card that I make, and I just keep them on my desktop beside my die cutting machine. Okay, so back to what I'm doing here. I dug through my scrap drawer. I store my scraps in little clear pockets so that I can easily pull them out when I need a small piece of cardstock and I don't have to pull out a full sheet and start cutting it up. So for this particular design, I wanted to cut out some white panels and a little black layer to go in behind those panels. So I'm just digging through my stash, and I'm going to pull out a couple of pieces of white cardstock and a couple of pieces of black cardstock. If you have trouble with scraps, try this method. I think you'll find that it really helps you reach for those ahead of reaching for a fresh sheet of cardstock. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut out all of these panels. I've got 3 black panels and 3 white panels. Now with the Master Layouts dies, the larger die from this set, I'm going to cut out the black layer, and then the smaller one has some stitching, and I'm going to cut out the white layer with that. And this is going to create a perfect little black border around the white piece of cardstock. You'll see what I mean when we get to adhering these together. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of these out, and then we're going to get to some stamping. So I have a couple of stamp sets here. I have the Gina Designs Autumn Silhouettes, and then I've also got the Gina Designs Natural Silhouettes. I really like this silhouette image. It's really pretty, and it's easy for stamping. You don't have to color, you just get a really nice, elegant image. I'm going to grab a stamping tool, and today I'm going to be using a mini MISTI for this. And I'm going to pop my little piece of cardstock in the center of my MISTI, and I'm going to kind of adhere it, get it taped down in the center so that I can stamp this without worrying about it moving. I basically want these images to kind of hang off of the bottom of the cardstock. So I'll just move my magnet strategically around the stamp and then grab a few pieces of masking tape, and this is just a low-tack frog tape. I use this for absolutely everything. I've had the same roll for like 2 years, and I mean, it's great. I love this roll of tape. Okay, so once I get that adhered, I'm going to grab some ink. I'm going to use Hero Arts Soft Granite ink. This is a really nice solid gray ink. I think it's the perfect cool tone. It's not like a warm tone with like, a cement feel. It's more of like a very neutral, soft, cool gray. So I'm going to ink up this stamp nice and good with that ink. And I'm going to do it twice to make sure I get a good solid impression. And I want to make sure that I give time for that ink to transfer to the paper. I'm also using my Peacock press. This is just a glass paperweight that I made. I turned it into a press for my Misty. It's got a little furniture protector pad on the bottom, and then this way I can apply firm and even pressure to the door of my Misty and get excellent stamped results. So that's kind of fun little thing, a DIY little project. Alright, so next up I'm going to do the same thing with another image. I'm going to use the natural silhouettes this time. And I'm going to do the exact same thing, place my cardstock in the middle of the Misty, get it taped down, and stamp my image. So I'm going to do this for all 3 panels. I'm going to stamp 3 soft granite floral silhouettes. So once all my stamping is done, I'm going to start layering these floral silhouettes to the black cardstock that I cut out previously. So I'm just going to use some dot adhesive for this. This is the Kokuyo dot liner. I use this probably in every one of my videos. I've had this tape runner for, I don't know, maybe about a year and a half or so. And I just keep buying the refills. I just find this the absolute best tape on the market. Best value for your money. And it's like the amount of tape that's in one roll of this adhesive is like 5 of your regular standard dot liners from whatever company that creates them. So I really like this. I get the most bang for my buck out of this tape runner. Okay, so I'm going to grab a ruler and I'm going to find the center of this piece of cardstock. I want to make sure that I start in the center because I'm going to lay these panels out on the front of this card. I want them to be straight and even because it'll be completely obvious if it's not, because this is going to be the focal image on our card. I don't want it to be, you know, sort of off kilter. So I'm going to go ahead, figure out the middle, and I'm going to apply some adhesive to the first panel, and I'm going to lay that in the very center of the card front. So I want to make sure that there's, a, you know, for the most part, the same amount of space on the left and the right, and the same amount of space on the top and the bottom, if that makes sense. So I want to make sure that I start with this panel directly in the center of my card. Okay, and then I'm going to use my ruler to help me line up the next panel. So I'm working one panel at a time, and now I'm just focusing on the right side. I'm just going to look at the amount of gray cardstock behind my panel on the right and the left to make sure that that's about the same on either side. And then I'm also using my ruler to make sure that the panels are straight and so it's lined up with the panel beside it. So once I get that adhered, I'm going to move over to the left side and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use my ruler and take that third panel and line it up and just making sure that there's the same amount of gray cardstock to the left and to the right, and putting it on the same line parallel to the other images. I mean, it's not perfect. I did okay. It's a little tiny, like, you know, centimeter or 2 off. It's not a big deal. I'm happy with the result. And let's go ahead and finish this card off. So I decided that this card needed like a wow factor. It needed like an extravagant pop of color. And I found this sort of aqua teal foil cardstock in my stash, and I just want to cut off some 1/4-inch strips. I want to add these to my cards so that it's a pop of color, but not too much, so that we still maintain this subtle gray nature of the card, the softness, but then with that little extra oomph. Okay, so I'm going to cut up those strips and I'm going to grab a silicone baking mat. Now I use this baking mat in my craft room for many things, and one of the uses, my favorite uses, is to apply adhesive to skinny little strips. I'll lay this on its back on the craft mat, run my adhesive dot runner over the strip, and any extra adhesive on the left or the right won't stick to the craft mat. Then I won't get tape all over my work surface, and I'll just have a perfectly covered strip of cardstock with adhesive and no mess everywhere else. So I love that just for that purpose. So I'm going to apply these foil strips, one to the top and one to the bottom of my card. And I felt like that was just enough pop to make me happy with this result. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that this card base is only 80 pounds. Now, when I added those panels to the front of the cardstock, I felt like it was more like front heavy, if that makes sense. So what I decided to do was create a matte layer with a heavy base weight cardstock. I'm using 110 pound Nina Classic Crest Solar White, and I'm just cutting a panel that measures 8 inches by 5 inches. And I'm going to adhere that to the inside of the card. This is going to do a couple of things. It's going to create more of a substantial feel to our card, so it's going to be able to support that heavier front, and it's going to give us a nice space where we can write a personal message. Now, I decided, since I had those strips cut, that I'm going to add a strip on the inside of my card to tie everything together nicely. And I feel like when you tie in elements from the envelope to the card front to the inside of the card, it just gives you a really nice cohesive feel. And it just feels like everything is where it's supposed to be. So I like to do that when I make my cards. So once that's done, I'm going to think about what I want to do for a sentiment. I decided that I was done stamping, and I wanted to find a nice word die or something to put on the front of this. So I went to my stash and I pulled out this Concord and Ninth die set. I liked these little banner dies. I really felt like this card was headed towards, like a friendship card or an encouragement card. So I saw these little banners and they say, "I'll be there for you." And I thought, this is perfect. I had a little extra scrap of black cardstock on my desk. So I'm just going to use that, and I'm going to run this through my Gemini Junior die cutting machine and get these little banner strips cut out. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere these down kind of staggered across the 3 panels. Almost like a little set of stairs across the panels. And then I'm also making sure that I keep those little centers to the B's and O's and R's to make sure that I fill in those little negative spaces. All right, next I've got some jewels from Pretty Pink Posh. I thought these coordinated so perfectly with that foil cardstock, and I want to add some sparkle across my panel. So I'm just going to sprinkle these little beautiful gems all across the front of my card panel, just to add that little extra sparkly sparkle. And then this card is going to be complete. That is absolutely it. I'm not going to do anything else to this card. I think it is just so perfect and elegant, and that pop of that teal sort of blue, I don't even know what color that is. Whatever it is, it's just gorgeous. I love the way this card turned out, and it makes me feel so excited to create more huge cards just like this one. Okay, so the very last thing I want to do is add the last extra strip of this foil cardstock I had to the front of my envelope. As I mentioned before, I like the cohesive look of elements tied from the envelope to the front of the card to the inside of the card. I think it just brings everything together. Okay, so that is it for this card. Here's a close-up look at our finished card project. This again is a 5.5 inch by 8.5 inch huge card that fits just perfectly inside of a 5 3/4 by 9 inch envelope. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend like almost a half an hour here with me. If you've made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you so much for being here. So coming up on screen are a couple of videos I think you may enjoy. Thanks again for joining me. Have yourself a lovely day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!